Next video in our batch review is about Module 5.1 Human Female Reproductive System, particularly talking about the anatomy. So let's now talk about the important things that needs to be remembered. First of all, the function. Number two is the external genitals, the vulva, and internal structures of the female reproductive system. So starting with the function, you already are familiar with this. We discussed this already. The number one important function of the female reproductive system is to produce female gametes called oocytes. So if the male is to produce the sperm cell, the female produces the egg cell. Secondly, hormones are also produced by the female reproductive system. So this will be very important in helping in the individual's reproductive cycle. Thirdly, it provides structural and biochemical support to the internally fertilized zygote before it is mature enough to be delivered or born. In other words, there is a need to support, nurture the egg cell before it is developed into a baby. So that would be the function of the female reproductive system. So now let's talk about the external genitals. So when we talk about the vulva, we have to talk about the following things. So you already know this, MC, pull, VA. So the MC is the main character, pull, one of you said voice actor, so it's actually easier to remember. So MC, pull, the voice actor. So this will be the parts of the external genitals. So M is the mons pubis, the C is the clitoris, the P is the prepuce, U is the urethral opening, L is for the labia minora, and of course the labia majora, and then the V is for the vagina, and of course the anus. So those are the external genitals that we have to take note of. Now it's quite easy to remember this, we already studied this. So starting from the top to the bottom, it actually follows more or less the MC, pull, VA. So the top one is the mons pubis, next one is the clitoris, this one surrounding it is the prepuce. Then you have the urethral opening, the labia minora protects it, and then the labia majora is here, and then you have the vagina and also the anus. So it's quite easy to remember the external reproductive system or the vulva. So what are the functions that we have to take note of? So when we talk about the mons pubis, it's a pad of fat over the pubic bone covered with hair at the onset of puberty. Labia majora, which would be the outside lip-like structures of the female external reproductive system. It is posterior to the mons pubis downwards, and it's folds of hair-covered skin. And then the labia minora is actually thinner, pigmented, medial or middle to the labia majora, and it protects. This is the one that would be directly protecting the urethra and the entrance to the female reproductive tract. So don't forget that important function, directly protecting the urethra and the entrance to the female reproductive tract. The clitoris is just like the glans penis, so therefore it is a structure that has the similar origins as the glans penis in males, encircled by the labia minora, and contains numerous nerve endings that provide sexual sensation and orgasm. So this will be very helpful in order to give sexual arousal to the female. The hymen will be the membrane partially covering the entrance of the vagina, and the Bartholin glands actually produces secretions that help lubricate the vagina. So this is very helpful to allow the entrance of the male reproductive system to be, rather than painful, it would be easier to allow it to enter. So this is another viewpoint of the vulva. So starting with the first one, the top one, this is the prepuce. The next one is the glans clitoris. The next one is the labia minora. And this structure wherein the folds of skin has been removed, you have here the corpus cavernosum, erectile tissue. Then you have here the bulbar vestibule, just a series of structures there. They have the urethral opening, the labia majora, the vaginal opening, the opening of the right Bartholin gland, the Bartholin glands, and also the anus. So that would be what another viewpoint of the female reproductive tract external structures would look like. Now we have to memorize this one, and I hope that we will be able to take note of all of this. So let's start with the one over here, this is the labia majora, then you have the labia minora, this one is the urethra, this one is the old vesicle, but we're not really gonna study that. We have here the clitoris, and then over here is the Bartholin's gland, and then the anus. The vagina is in this area, and that's it for the external portion of the vulva or the female reproductive tract. Now, we also discussed that there is a similarity of origin, or what we call as complementarity of the structures between the male and the female. So you will see here that the yellow structure pertains to this structure, the violet structure pertains to that, and the blue structure pertains to that. So very interesting that the glans penis is complementary or analogous to the female clitoris, as you can see over here. Then you have the urethral fold, which is actually the shaft of the penis later on, which is analogous to this one, labia minora, and then the vaginal opening. So that's very important here. So the shaft of the penis would be complementary to this structure. Then the scrotum is actually complementary or analogous to the labia majora. So don't forget that the glans penis is to the clitoris, the shaft of the penis is to the labia minora, the scrotum is to the labia majora. So the point here is that there is the similarity of origin owing to having the same template at the beginning when the male and the female embryos are still developing. Okay, so thirdly, the internal structures of the female reproductive system. So this is also very familiar. So we have to take note of the following. So this is the vagina. Then this is the cervix, very important. We have here the fallopian tube. You have the fimbriae. The fimbriae would be the finger-like structures here. This is the ovary. And you have the uterus. The whole structure here is the uterus where the baby or the embryo will be implanting. So let's talk about the importance or the functions of this individual internal structure. Starting with the ovaries. So these are oval shaped, 2 to 3 centimeters in length, very small, and it is where the oocytes and the female sex hormones are produced. So the mesovarium and the broad ligament will be supporting this one, and take note that the ovaries will be made to the tunica albuginea, the cortex, and also the stroma, where the follicle will be produced. So this is the cortex, this is the medulla, this is tunica albuginea. So this is a structure of what we call as the ovary. So that will be very important. So don't forget that the mesovarium, the broad ligament, will be supporting the internal reproductive structure. Otherwise, they may be misplaced when we are moving or when we have some kind of bumping accident. So the vagina, on the other hand, is a muscular canal about 10 centimeters long. And of course, it will be receiving the penis during intercourse. It is the entrance of the reproductive tract and also the exit from the uterus during menses and childbirth. So those will be the function of the vagina. So don't forget that. So childbirth, menses, receives the penis. When we talk about the fallopian tubes, so this is the vagina. It receives the penis. Then we talked about the ovaries. This will be containing the female hormone progesterone and estrogen, and also production of the follicles, the egg cell itself. So let's now talk about this. Okay, the fallopian tubes would be very important for ovulation because when the egg is released, then the funnel-like opening of the oviduct will be getting the egg cell. Otherwise, ectopic pregnancy might happen wherein the egg cell might go to other places aside from the fallopian tube, outside the abdominal cavity or outside the fallopian tube, and then sperm cell might fertilize them, causing ectopic pregnancy. Now, you have to remember that there would be several parts of the fallopian tubes, IIFA. So you have the isthmus, the infundibulum, the fimbriae, and the ampulla. So the isthmus is this very short section of the fallopian tube. The ampulla is the longer one, wherein most of the egg cells are fertilized in this area. This is the infundibulum, and more importantly is the fimbriae, or finger-like structures. That would be the one collecting the egg cell once it is released from the ovary. So don't forget the uterus. This is where the implantation of the fertilized egg happens, and interestingly, it can grow in size to accommodate a 4-kilogram fetus. More importantly would be the layer of endometrium that supplies the blood vessels. So you have the fundus and the corpus as part of that. So this is the fundus. This is the corpus, and more importantly, this will be the endometrium, wherein the fertilized egg cell, the embryo, will be implanted where the baby will later grow. This is important also later in the female hormonal control, because it will increase, decrease as the monthly cycle happens. So the menstruation cycle happens. Okay, and lastly is the cervix. This is the neck of the uterus that opens into the vagina. This produces mucus secretion that helps facilitate germ movement. So this would be the entrance towards the uterus, usually closed but would be open during the ovulation, and the mucus will become thinned, allowing the sperm cell to swim through it. So it's very important. So let's just finish up this one. This one is, of course, the rectum. This one is the cervix, the fornix. We're not really gonna talk about that. This is the uterus, the sigmoid colon, the ovary. This one is the fallopian tube. The fimbriae will be this structure over here that will be collecting the egg cell. The bladder will be this one. Pubic bone, skin's gland, and the G-spot. So those are the important internal structures of the female reproductive system. So we go to the last video for our batch review.